Hey y'all, this is the When We Walk podcast, where we talk about the things we talk about when we take our walks. I'm Shireen.
I'm Micah.
Let's chat.
So as of the time of this recording, just yesterday, we celebrated 20 years.
We did.
Can you believe it's been 20 years together?
It feels...
In marriage?
In a weird way, it feels like, yeah, that makes sense. We've been doing a lot of life.
Yeah.
I mean, we have 4 grown kids now. Not grown, but...
Yeah.
But then also it feels like a blink.
Just
I remember
yesterday.
thinking about 20 people who had been married 20 years and being like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Now we're those people.
I know, we're those people.
And like when you look back at I look back at some of our old...
Yes. That is exactly what I was going to say.
That's when you know.
I think this is the first year. It's
old.
not like that much has changed between last year and this year.
No.
I think mentally it feels like the difference between 19 and 20 feels huge.
It does.
And then I looked back at the pictures and I was like, actually look like a different person.
Yes.
Like,
we look like
so
babies.
young. Yes.
Someone
and
should
people
not
always
have
say
let
that.
us
Look at
walk
these
down the aisle.
babies, like a lot of our friends. And you say that when you've been married 12, 13, 14 years, but then you hit 20 and you're like, no, you're kind of a different person.
We look like children.
Yeah. And then you posted that little reel of kind of so many pictures from our lives.
Yeah.
And you just kind of forget about how much life we've lived
know.
together, how many things you can do together in 20 years and how much changes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then add 4 kids to it and
Yeah.
a move and all kinds of things. So, yeah.
It's been great.
It has been great.
Here's
We
to
like
more.
being married.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
It's
a good thing.
We enjoy it. Yeah. So it is the kickoff of February.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a month where love is in the air and people are talking a lot about relationships.
Love is in the stores
The
and then
stores.
we cultivate it.
I was just at
Love
Target
should
the other
always be in
day.
the air.
Mm-hmm. That's
But
true. That's true.
the
It's
celebration
just we're more
of it,
conscious
right.
of our relationship status, I think,
True.
in February to some degree. Many people are. And not just romantically. I think it can get you thinking about all kinds of relationships just because it tends to be the theme of the month.
Yeah. Yep.
So relationships, I think it'd be fun for us to spend the next few weeks talking about this, all kinds
it'd
of
be good.
relationships.
This is a question a lot of people ask us all the time is talk to us about marriage or how to date well or, even how to have friends when you are married or how to interact with, single people when you're married and things like that. So
Yeah. So
I think
we
that's
all have
helpful.
relationships in our lives. I think I always think about it being such an interesting dynamic because relationships are the source of the most painful aspects of our life,
it's true.
but they're also something we all crave and long for.
Because we want these like intimate connections with people, right? We're designed for it.
Yeah.
But in being vulnerable and intimate with someone, you're really putting yourself out there to be deeply hurt,
Yeah.
potentially. I mean, it's a risk
Yeah.
that you take with every relationship to the level that you're vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of we say this a lot around here. We're made for relationship. So we kind of can't really live without it.
Right.
Just like we're made for water and food and air. We're made for it. If you try to live without it, because you could say, no, I could exist on an island by myself and be okay. But we know even from a psychological standpoint, sociological standpoint, you will not be healthy and well developed if you live an isolated life.
I mean, the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks.
Yes.
Anyone. I mean, we
Yeah.
are so dating ourselves, but
yeah,
he,
if your best
made
friend is a volleyball.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's true. We need
It is
relationships.
true. There's science behind that. So
Yes.
it is interesting that we're made for relationships, and yet they can be the source of so much hurt and pain, but also the source of the best things in our lives as well.
And you can be healed in relationship again. Maybe
Yeah.
not the same one that was broken and hurt, you were hurt in, or we've seen people healed in that same relationship, but we are healed by other healthy relationships too.
Yeah.
It is a source of all of that. Like it's important. So
yeah. And so thinking of the idea of being made for a relationship, we are made in the image of God and he exists in community. He exists in relationship with himself in a sense. I mean, it's the mystery of the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are in perfect relationship. There is no drama. There is no conflict.
Turns
There
out.
is no pain. There is no offense. But we were made in that image. And so we are in the same way he exists in relationship. We are made for relationship. The problem is because sin exists in our world and our flesh is a part of who we are, this side of heaven, that we experience the things that he doesn't in his community. We experience all the downsides, and yet we still want it though, because we're made for it.
Yeah. I think it's neat because we just talked about in our Bible series of how much the scriptures emphasize the human relationship and the connection to God and the just human relationship, and how much God that is what he came to restore. It does show the value he has in us having right relationship with him and right relationship with each other, and like teaching us how to do that.
Yeah.
And so it is a big thing. No wonder so many people talk about marriage and how to do marriage well for years and years. And there's a million books on it and things like that, because it is the most intimate relationship you can have on earth that is a mirror of our relationship with Christ. Obviously, he uses that as him as the bride, us as us as the bride, him as the bridegroom. But because it's the most intimate, it can be the one that hurts the most. So
and so thinking of marriage, like it's even us with our 20 years, I think so few people make it this far, and that might sound like an extreme statement, but I heard like a great insight on this in a book I read, Sacred Fire by Ronald Rolheiser. He's a Catholic priest, a single guy, but he understands relationship unlike anybody I've ever read. Right. Yeah. And so he talked about the idea that when you get married, you're actually in love. You think you're in love with a person, but you're actually in love with an idea. And really the idea of marriage. And you can't really know who the person is fully, because you're making a lifelong commitment to a person who, but you can't see the future.
No.
I've heard some people say you're committing to a future love. You're saying, I promise to be here for you, even though I don't know what the future holds. And then he says is about 10 years in, you have finally spent enough time with this person to actually know who they are. And at that point, your commitment becomes realized and lived out, or it begins to crumble, because you actually have come into the reality of like, this is actually who I married, and this is what I am now committed to. And so many people at that point want to just start over. Yeah. And they think, well, it'll be different with someone else. And so they divorce and they start over and marry somebody younger or whatever it is. But if you can push through that his whole thing is like, that's actually where maturity, it's where commitment, it's where real devotion actually begins to flourish in a relationship, is kind of after the decade mark. Wow. But I think the 10 to 20 year mark the 10 to 20 year season in marriage is really hard. I think a lot of people struggle in that season.
Especially if you have children, you've settled into maybe a job that's either mundane or difficult, or you're starting to have job changes, which we know a lot of people in those seasons who have. And you're kind of, in some ways, like for many, you're hitting, 30s into 40s. And there's this like almost reinvention of yourself potentially, or like you're having a lot of self-discovery. You're having to let go of a lot. You're realizing some dreams may not happen in life. So there's a lot of interpersonal things happening, and then outside things happening. But then you're married to this person who's also going through some of those things, who's also feeling all the same things, and you bump up against each other, and it really does make for a lot of friction and makes it really hard.
Yeah, it does. So let's just talk about this. The two things that we tend to talk to couples about when they come in to our home for premarital meetings.
For years. We've talked about these same things.
Basic things that I think are really helpful for a healthy marriage for the long haul is intimacy and expectations.
Yeah.
So intimacy, first, let's just clarify. We're not just talking about physical intimacy.
Only.
So a few weeks ago, side note, when I was preaching on this and talking about how intimacy in marriage is related to intimacy with Jesus, I never clarified in my sermon that I'm not just talking about like physical intimacy is kind of the symbol of the type of relationship we're to have with Jesus and all that kind of symbolism, though there is that there. But that wasn't really meant to be like my main point. It was relational intimacy.
Yeah.
I never clarified that. Hopefully people got that. I don't know.
Because I don't know why, but everyone thinks when you hear the word intimate,
it's sexual.
You immediately go to sexual, but that's not really what intimacy
it's relational
means.
intimacy.
There is a relational piece to it,
and it's all those.
Well.
It's the I think it really why we talk about that is because at the very beginning, as God defines marriage, it's two becoming one. So you could call it oneness.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good way. To say
the connection, closeness, whatever. But I think intimacy is really what you're getting at. Is like in a marriage, if your entire everything you do and are about is filtered through, is this increasing our intimacy or is this pulling against our intimacy?
That's really
and that
good.
can be, again, sexual intimacy, but also can be communication. It can be how you do your finances, how you spend your time.
Because all of it leads to a level of intimacy. Because
in-laws.
You can actually have an intimate relationship even with a friendship, right?
Yeah,
like a
absolutely.
deep connection in communication, in vulnerability.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, because there are people, I mean, like the guy you talked about, your author, who are single or choose singleness or, you know, have had a single life who can have an intimate relationship.
Absolutely.
But in marriage, there is still layers of intimacy that are uniquely different, that is what, you know, I think God wanted modeled for a relationship with him.
I think all people, whether you're married or single, crave intimacy.
Absolutely.
And can have it. Even single people can have it.
Yep. To a degree,
Yeah. The thing that sets marriage apart is that it's exclusive and that it's sexual. But you can have so many other types of intimacy in your friendships and in your camaraderie with others that I think for single people, it's okay to recognize I still need this in my life. I still need this kind of connection with other people.
So we talk about this with people going into marriage because the fight for your intimacy starts right away.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because it feels easy if you're thinking just physical and you're newly married and you're passionate with one another and you're excited about what's coming. It just feels like, oh, that's going to be easy.
Yeah.
I don't have to work at that right now. Or there's no kids fighting against my connection. It's just we do our jobs, we come home, we hang out. But really now there is all kinds of things that come against our intimacy. And we have to fight for what that looks like and start habits and patterns like early on.
Yeah, it's true. And our culture, even more so now than when we got married 20 years ago, even more so, is we so celebrate independence, which is to some degree opposite of intimacy. And we think it's opposite of dependence, but it really is opposite of intimacy. And it's almost now celebrated when a couple gets married and they don't lose themselves. You know, it's this idea, I'm still me and you're still you and you've got your thing and I've got my thing. And that's fine, depending on what you're talking about. But I think when that becomes what a beautiful marriage is intended to be, rather than, not like it is losing yourself.
It is.
Like that's the whole point.
It's giving yourself away.
Absolutely.
The same way that we do for Jesus and that he did for us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's not celebrated in our world. And so you enter into marriage, and if your goal right off the bat is to maintain your sense of independence or maintain your own, individual identity, or to not lose yourself in your marriage. Now, there are negative examples of what it means to lose yourself in your marriage. But if that's the goal, and that's kind of what's being fed, and then just on a practical level, you think about your time, like, but I still want to have like my thing that I do, my friends. And so it's been great, I think, to talk through with so many different couples on the value of filtering their time, their money, their energy, their focus, their decisions through? Is this drawing us together, or is it pulling us apart?
I think it goes back to what you said about oneness. Like, your movement is toward oneness, and that doesn't mean losing your identity. It just means growing in being selfless. Is what the whole point of relationships, especially marriage, is becoming more selfless. And that happens the minute you marry someone and start sharing a bathroom together, and you didn't know things about each other, or a bed together, and you realize they snore or have restless leg syndrome or whatever. But, and you grow in yourself, becoming selfless, and then children even more so, you know, grows that. But I think that is what that oneness has to look like as you grow together, right? Okay, so what are, you know me, I like practicals. So when we talk to couples and we talk about this, you know, keeping your intimacy, and you're newly married, and what does that look like even for newly marrieds? What can they do? Yeah,
I think for newly marrieds, I think it, there's so many, it's hard when it's just general. It's easier when somebody's sitting on our couch.
Yeah, it is. We talk through.
To talk to them about it. But
I think good habits. We always tell them to start with like
build your habits.
Yeah, your first year of marriage is really important for building habits.
And be intentional.
And being intentional. So you think every night is free for us because we don't have as much going on. But instead, so you lose your intentionality of date nights or intentional connection, or you grow in the habit of TV's on every single day. And so our focus is that and not each other and conversation. Now phones are big distraction.
It's kind of that old, kind of the Jewish custom. I think it's in Leviticus. They talk about this, where for, you know, a man who is eligible for the military. When he would get married for the first year, he was ineligible. And the idea there was you need to spend the first year of your marriage building your marriage. And so you don't go away to battles. You don't go away to war. You stay home.
You're focusing
you begin to build your marriage. And so that first year is healthy habits. It's, you know, how are we going to reorganize our lives? I think for sometimes we can think the only thing that's really going to change is my address and my left hand, you know, that we'll move in together. We'll put a ring on each other's fingers, but we're going to continue to live
the life
as we've known life. But you have to recognize I need to now reorient my whole life around this new relationship and this new commitment I've made. Is really, it's not just a person, though it is, but it's also a commitment that surrounds that person to say, now we need to rearrange our whole lives around this new commitment. And when you spend the first year doing that and you evaluate everything, your social life, your money, your time, your dynamics with your friendships, your dynamics with your parents. I mean, the in-laws is huge. One. It's like, well, we go over to your parents' house and it seems like you know, are more connected to your mom than you are to me. You know, those types of things.
Conversations.
And it's a, you know, how do we begin to leave and cleave? How do we reorient our whole lives around this new commitment I've made? Because
those habits you see them. They really matter once you start living life more, right? Jobs become more stressful or take up more of your time. Then you start having children, you know, more and more responsibilities, buying a house, like go down the list. The more you own, you know, financial stress. If you've put in those intentional practices to connect intimately, both physically, with conversation, like all of it, then those things won't feel as like pressing onto your relationship. It'll still be challenging. And you really do have to reevaluate all the time. I think we've learned over the years, like we have to make sure, we can tell now. We can just feel it. There's like this feeling of like, I am so disconnected from you that if we don't like go on a date night or have sex, like one, both, something, we know that we're continuing to just drift apart. Absolutely. And we can do that because it's easy to just become roommates. Because your relationship is always, it's dynamic. It's always
it's moving in some direction, either together or apart. It's never just like, oh, we're together, here it is, it's going to be like this forever.
Yeah. And so that is when you've learned to cultivate intimacy, and then you can start to tell, oh, we've lost that connection that we know we need to be healthy together. And not just for us, but now for our kids and for our jobs. And because this relationship affects everything else around us. And so we have to readjust for intimacy.
Yeah. Which then kind of leads to expectations. And that's kind of what you're getting at, or some of the practicals. I think how this is interrelated, because we have different, love languages, the classic thing, or we have different expectations coming into marriage based on what's been modeled to us, what we've seen, what we've liked in other marriages that we've been around, or what we haven't liked. Or for some people who are divorcing and remarrying, it's like what they experienced and now colors. So I think having healthy expectations, and really the thing with expectations is we all have them. We just don't all
say them,
communicate them. Yeah. And so you carry a set of expectations into this new relationship and this new commitment, but it's important to name what those expectations are and then agree upon, are those healthy? Are those, is that really what we're going to be like? Yeah.
But you might not even know what they are until you get in.
Yeah. That's true.
Because I think there were some we didn't even know that we had.
For sure. Yeah.
Until we were into marriage a little bit and then realized, oh, I have this as an expectation of you or of our marriage or of our home or whatever because of what I grew up in. I didn't even know it was an expectation. And then you have to share it and or else you'll be frustrated and your spouse will be frustrated.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it'll lead to a lot of frustration.
Yes. So expectations related to like roles, like what is a husband supposed to do? What's a wife supposed to do? And how does that play out, again, in every area of your relationship?
Yeah. Like in us, my dad cooked a ton in our family. Like he and my mom were very like, we share this and we do it together and we do it as a family sometimes. In your house,
in my house,
I had never, ever seen your dad do anything in the kitchen.
Peanut butter and crackers.
Peanut butter crackers and getting his Coke out of the fridge.
Yeah. And
it's all good. A very different.
Yeah.
And we had to talk about that. I wanted us to be in the kitchen together. And that was like a fun thing in the evenings to me. And it was a little bit of a challenge
Not as
for
much,
you.
but where my mind went,
And it wasn't because you were like, woman, get in the kitchen. No. It was more like, oh, I didn't know. Are there guys that do this? Like, is this what we want to do?
Well, it just wasn't even like a part of my, like consciously.
No, you didn't even have like a framework for it. Yeah. But we had to talk about it.
Yeah. So having like those roles and duties conversation, what do you, the trash is piling up and, it's like, well, I thought you were going to take it out. I thought you, like, whose job is, it's simple things like that, but it's also big things that, in terms of what do we really envision for our marriage and
finances, all kinds of things.
Working, do you see yourself staying at home with kids? Do you see yourself, either person, or do you see yourself out in the workplace? Do you see us both working? Do we, there's so many conversations, money, savings accounts, how we spend. I mean, there's just, it's ongoing and it's never ending really. But if you learn early on to begin to try and identify, name, and speak out those expectations, that as you grow as a person, it just becomes a normal part of the relationship. And as you grow as a person, things are going to change and expectations, desires, all that will change. But you've gotten in the practice of knowing how to talk about them. I think a lot of times early on, couples don't know how to talk about those things.
Or they're afraid to. They're afraid to bring it up.
They don't want to conflict or whatever. And so it just then becomes you never have learned how to talk about these actual things.
I mean, especially like when we always say when it comes to in-laws, like that is it's actually a really, really big one of setting right expectations, especially if you live in town with family of like, this is our new family. And then how together are we going to interact with your parents, my parents, siblings, there will be an adjustment, and then they have expectations of you. That's the other hard part is like there's new there's a whole new slew of expectations all around you.
And that family has what works there, and your other family has what works there.
And so you have to talk about that one. That's one of the big ones we always talk about with newly married couples.
And it comes alive on another level once you start having kids.
Yes.
And you see a different, especially if it's the first grandchild, you see a different version of your parents than you ever knew existed.
We definitely saw that with my parents.
Yes.
in lots of good ways, but also like, whoa, okay, you came alive
they're
in
visiting.
a new way.
Yeah.
And so you have to learn how to navigate that, but you also have to learn how to have brave and hard conversations.
Yeah, with each other and then with your parents.
With your parents. And that remembering it with that you are on the same team. It's not like that's the part of the cleaving part is like, we are a team together.
Yep.
So if I'm having problems with, your parents, you have to go to bat for me.
Yep.
And we had always decided that from day one. Like it's not me just fighting my way through my new in-law family. It's you helping integrate, me in. And we,
that's true.
Family, you have to work through that. And it's hard.
Yeah. But as long as you know that it's a hurdle that you will have to overcome at some point, and you're equipped with the expectation that we got to talk about this at some point.
And the same with friends.
Because there's not always easy answers to any of it.
Right.
But you just know that this will be something we have to navigate one day.
And the same with friends. Yeah. Like we know tons of couples who like, thinking of one who the guy was like, I always have my guys' nights like 2 nights a week or whatever. And she's like, no, you got to change that.
Right.
Okay.
He was super extroverted. She was more introverted. Yeah.
And they had to have some really, difficult conversations on the front end and set realistic expectations for both.
Yep.
And then you have to share that with your friends.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I can only come to one guy's night or whatever.
Yeah. And for, even your hobbies and your interests, like maybe my golf game isn't as strong as it used to be after I get married. And is that okay? And you have to talk about that. Like,
and that's some of that selflessness. Like I'm choosing this commitment. I'm choosing this person over these things that used to be my everything before. And that's a growth. It's a growth curve for every year.
Yeah. Yeah. And it will at some point in some way, in one of those areas that we've hit on, like it will feel a little like death.
Yes.
Which can then cause you to react and say, this doesn't feel right. If I have to die to something, if I have to let go of something. But that's a lot of, in the purest sense and in the most healthy sense, that's really what marriage is, but it's also what relationships are, right?
It's what love is, really. Yeah. Love isn't an emotion.
Sacrificial.
Yeah. Love, we were talking about love being in the air. It's not like this whatever feeling, butterfly
Here's what
feeling.
You do for me.
Yeah. It is actually like selfless. It is sacrificial. It is a choice. I think I've always told our kids, like, love isn't a feeling. It's a choice. You're going to choose to love your sister in this moment who's being a whatever, and forgive them. And that is love. And it is actually can be more challenging, but on the other side, like the best decision.
Yep.
Best commitment, the best choice.
Yeah, it's true.
But it's not easy.
It's not easy, but it's also wonderful.
It is.
And again, not just in marriage, but friendships, family relationships, when you really have that framework of like, this is ultimately about me giving myself to you in some way, shape, or form. And
that intimacy and expectations can actually be helpful in all relationships when you think about that.
Yep. It's great. Okay, well, more to come as we go through the month of February.
There's so much,
Deep dive into some things. It'll be great. So as we wrap up, what's worst anniversary memory
because we just hit 20 years. Worst? You're setting me up because you know what our worst is.
Yes.
I don't remember what year it was. I just remember the restaurant.
Yeah.
Do you remember what year we were at?
I think
Strunella?
It was 3 or 4 years ago.
Midtown.
Yeah.
It was a couple years ago. At least 4, I think.
Yeah.
I think it was pre-COVID.
Oh, you're probably right. Yeah, I think it was
like
pre-COVID. So 19.
And I don't even remember what.
Or 20, yeah.
Oh, I do remember what we were fighting.
Yeah, I remember very clearly.
We got in the biggest fight at the restaurant.
Yeah.
Like
5 minutes, not even 5 minutes into our.
We hadn't even ordered.
We had not even ordered.
No, we had just ordered, I think.
Okay.
Because we were trying to decide,
I made
do we
super unkind comment.
Uh-huh.
It was expectations. It was about money.
Yep.
It was about
things we wanted to do, decisions we were trying to make because it was the beginning of the year.
And you were in dreamer mode of like, what do we want to do this year? And I was in scarcity
you were in
mode
scarcity mode. Yes.
We don't have money. We don't have time. We just need to be
and you were like
wise and practical.
I'm coming just wanting to have this like dreaming message. And you were like,
oh my gosh. Now I'm like reliving this whole thing.
Yes.
And I made an unkind comment and it was over after that.
It was over. I remember it being in tears and trying to like hide my face from
Our waitress was so uncomfortable.
Oh, she could tell.
She totally knew.
I just remember eating in complete silence.
Yeah.
Which we never do. We are talking all the time.
Yeah. It was
it
like
was so terrible.
It was like a 42-minute meal. Like we got our food, we ate, we boxed up,
and we didn't go to a cheap place, right? It's your anniversary. You're going to a nice place.
It was awful.
And I remember thinking that was the biggest waste of money.
Yes.
Ever. I was so mad.
It was terrible.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
I'm glad we can both agree on that.
Yes. Hopefully we.
Okay. Do you have a better one?
Do I have a best? I don't know. I thought I did, but I don't know if it's because your birthday and our anniversary are so close together, but it's more of like an era.
Yeah.
Where it was young kids.
Yes, I know where you're going.
Where our friend who had said, hey, as my gift to y'all, I'm going to give y'all a night away, meaning I'll take care of the kids. Y'all find a place to stay.
Yes.
And for a couple years, we would do that here in town for one night. And it was like, without having family in town,
game changer.
It was the biggest gift in the world. It was huge for us as a couple, huge for us to be able to just get away for a night. And then we like stretched it to like, hey, can we do 2 nights? And she was like, yeah, you can do 2 nights. So after a couple of years, we did 2 nights away. And that was a whole other game changer.
I know.
And that season of life. So if you're listening and you have friends who have young kids and you have the capacity
to take
care of their kids and give them a night away, or if you are married and you are dying right now, figure out a way to take some time away. It was once a year, but it was such a huge thing for us to be able to get away for a night or two.
Especially when they were young, for sure. Yeah,
it's great. Okay, well, to many, many more years without experiences like Strinella. Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us on When We Walk. Hopefully this was helpful and encouraging for everybody, and we look forward to continuing to talk more about relationships in the weeks ahead.